beware of any attacks supposedly coming from Russia between the New Year and January 20th, as it most likely will be a false flag just to make Donald Trump's life more difficult. Stay tuned. This is Matthew Brenner. Happy New Year's Eve 2016. It's been quite an interesting year. Well, to make the points I want to make about propaganda, Obama, tensions with Russia, and everything else, there is the question of fake news versus real news. So let's go back to after the election, a purple wicked witch of Chappaqua, Hillary Clinton, lectures the American people on so-called fake news. What does she say?
The epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year, it's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences. This isn't about politics or partisanship. Lives are at risk. Lives of ordinary people just trying to go about their days, to do their jobs, contribute to their communities.
Right, Hill Dog. You wouldn't be referring to the lives of, say, the American people that you and the cabal could be putting in danger by inciting tensions against Russia for the so-called Russian hacks by the GRU against the DNC and Podesta without the evidence? No. Here's the clip of Julian Assange that CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, nobody wants you to hear in America.
Hillary Clinton stated multiple times, falsely, that 17 US intelligence agencies had assessed that Russia was the source of our publications. Okay. That's false.
More to my point, let's unravel what Obama had to say back in November. Listen.
Based on current surveys of public opinion in the United States, it turns out that the majority of Americans think I've done a pretty good job. That we haven't, in fact, gone too fast, as you describe it. But what is certainly true is that the American people, just like the German people, just like the British and people around the world, are seeing extraordinarily rapid change. The world is shrinking, economies have become much more integrated, and demographics are shifting. Because of the internet and communications, the clash of cultures is much more direct. People feel, I think, less certain about their identity, less certain about economic security. They're looking for some means of control.
Right. They want to take the power back. And this would explain why the independent media and the so-called alt-right have done very well, because they have come not to trust their government, rightly so, not to trust the cabal in government, rightly so, and this would explain why Donald Trump was elected. And you know what? He did not need help from Vladimir Putin. People were already starting to see our disastrous foreign policy and the corruption of politicians. Yes, the WikiLeaks shed even more light. Notice they never disputed their validity, just that they came from Russia, Russian hacking. Let's listen to more.
And what that means is that the politics in all of our countries is going to require us to manage technology and global integration and all these demographic shifts in a way that makes people feel more control, that gives them more confidence in their future, but does not resort to simplistic answers or divisions of race or tribe or a crude nationalism, which I think can be contrasted to the pride and patriotism that we all feel about our respective countries.
Okay, Barry, sounds like you're going back into your used car salesman, slick type of a stance where you can tell us exactly what we want to hear, but when it comes right down to it, why, if you want it to be fair to people with diverse interests, would you sign the addendum to the 2017 NDAA, the Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act, which clearly was supposed to be for wartime? But before we go on, let's listen to a special report from InfoWars about what this actually entails.
What there was a massive announcement of a new Ministry of Truth that dwarfs anything in the former Soviet Union, to be run by the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. Long before Hillary lost, long before dying MSM rolled out this call to license reporters and shut down blogs and news organizations like InfoWars, Homeland Security, bipartisanly, along with a string of multinational corporations and central banks, have been lobbying to bring in a system to control what can be printed and what can be broadcast and what can be transmitted here in the United States. True draconian police state censorship. But this is okay because they say they're legalizing it. Kind of like the CIA was legalized 3 years ago to engage in domestic propaganda. Now they're just getting the funding. So let's look deep inside some of the provisions of the bill that is now law, thanks to President Obama. You may recall that it was reported on in early June that a bill to implement the U.S. very own de facto Ministry of Truth had been quietly introduced into Congress. As with any legislation attempting to dodge the public spotlight, the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act of 2016 marks a further curtailment of press freedom and another avenue to stultify avenues of accurate information. Introduced by Congressman Adam Kinzinger and Ted Lieu, H.R. 5181 seeks a whole government approach, this is a quote, a whole government approach without the bureaucratic restrictions, to counter, quote, foreign disinformation and manipulation, which they define as Donald Trump, InfoWars, Matt Drudge, Breitbart. They openly say we're Russian agents. Isn't that hilarious? But it's not funny because they've actually now put this into law. In fact, who do you think they're talking about right here? Continued. Also called the Countering Information Warfare Act of 2016 in the Senate, or S2692, when introduced in March by Senator Rob Portman, the legislation represents a dramatic return to Cold War-era government propaganda battles.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A constitutional lawyer, that's our President of the United States, putting into place something that supposedly is going to protect us, but you know damn well will be used to stifle free speech in our country. Shame, shame, shame. So what other crap is spewing out of Obama's mouth in this speech?
But as long as we stay true to our democratic principles, as long as elections have integrity, as long as we respect freedom of speech, freedom of religion, as long as there are checks and balances in our governments so that the people have the ability to not just make judgments about how well government is serving them, but also change governments if they're not serving them well, then I have confidence that over the long term, progress will continue. And I think it's especially important for those of us who believe in a world where we're interdependent, that believes in mutual interests and mutual respect between nations. It's particularly important that we reach out to everybody in our countries, those who feel disaffected, those who feel left behind by globalization, and address their concerns in constructive ways as opposed to more destructive ways. And I think that can be done. But it's hard. It requires creativity. It requires effective communications. Part of what's changed in politics is social media and how people are receiving information. It's easier to make negative attacks and simplistic slogans than it is to communicate complex policies.
Now have 17 intelligence agencies in the United States that have confirmed that these hacks have taken place by Russians.
The intelligence community says that Russia's behind this in some form. But
cybersecurity experts are blaming the hack attack on the intelligence agencies of Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The Russian government has engaged in espionage against Americans. They have hacked American websites, American accounts of private people, of institutions. Then they have given that information to WikiLeaks for the purpose of putting it on the internet. This has come from the highest levels of the Russian government, clearly from Putin himself, in an effort, as 17 of our intelligence agencies have confirmed, to influence our election. So I actually think the most important question of this evening, Chris, is finally, will Donald Trump admit and condemn that the Russians are doing this and make it clear that he will not have the help of Putin in this election, that he rejects Russian espionage against Americans, which he actually encouraged in the past.
So say it one more time, President Obama, just so everybody in the audience can hear you, and we will listen.
Part of what's changed in politics is social media and how people are receiving information. It's easier to make negative attacks and simplistic slogans than it is to communicate complex policies.
Right. In other words, what he's coming out and telling you right in your face is it's easier to just say, Russia did it, Russia did it, Russia did it. That narrative goes over so much easier for the White House. And what the hell, they don't even really have to substantiate it, right? Right. Because propaganda is legal after all.
In order to avoid the substance of what was found in John Podesta's emails that were leaked by WikiLeaks, well, Clinton campaign operatives typically pivot to Russia, and they say nobody should be looking at the contents of these emails because we were the victims of a Russian cyber attack. Now, they do this to avoid criticism, and they're making this really huge claim about Russia, but they're not citing any evidence. Now, they will say that 17 government agencies have in fact confirmed that it is Russian operatives who did hack into John Podesta's emails. Now, when we ask them to present any reports or show us any evidence, we get nothing. And we now know that there's a specific reason for that. It's because the evidence is sparse. Because John Podesta wasn't hacked by Russian hackers. He was the victim of a phishing scam like many Americans are. Solon explains, how did alleged hackers get access to the email account of John Podesta, the chair of Hillary Clinton's campaign? Well, apparently, he just gave them his password. This is according to a leading cybersecurity firm, which says Podesta fell for a simple phishing scam frequently used in spam mail. A researcher at the company SecureWorks told Motherboard that Podesta was sent an email on March 19th that appeared to have come from Google. In the email was a link using Bitly, an URL shortening service. Podesta clicked on this link, which took him to a fake Google page where he then typed in his login information. According to the cybersecurity firm, this is how the email account of former Secretary of State Colin Powell was also hacked. The alleged hackers appear to later have sent Podesta's emails to the whistleblowing journalism organization WikiLeaks, which has published them this month in installments.
The Russian government hacked your email?
Yes, that's what I believe, and I think we have been informed by law enforcement sources that they're conducting this investigation as part of the broader investigation, that they've just taken the unprecedented step of the Director of National Intelligence and the Director of Homeland Security have said are at their root Russian hacks. So,
all the
Mr. Assange
transcripts
is acting as a, and look, if this was about transparency, they put them all out. So they're dribbling them out because they want because the Russians are intervening in this election on behalf of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has been someone who has basically taken every position that Vladimir Putin has, as opposed to the bipartisan group of on both sides of the aisle, of people who have thought what's in the issues of the United States.
Have you seen any evidence?
Marco Rubio even this morning said that he wouldn't condone it, participate in it, because he knows what's up. This is the Russians trying to interfere in our election.
Have any of the emails or transcripts that have been released been doctored, or are they accurate?
Well, I'm only going to say this, Ruth. When this first came out, it came out with a lie from Julian Assange, which was that, when he first released these, that I was a co-owner of the possessive group, which is factually completely untrue. So, what is false, what is accurate, we're not going to get into.
Are the transcripts of the speeches before Goldman Sachs, are they accurate?
Look, I think what I would say to that, Wolf, is we're not going to get into that, but what...
Right, Podesta. You freaking creep. You hear all the people in the background there? We're not going to get into that, because the distraction here is that we know there are things that were true. Why would Donna Brazil have lost her job if it weren't true? Why would Wasserman Schultz have resigned if it weren't true? The big distraction is not that the truth has been told. And as people have asked, if these Democrats weren't hiding so many horrible things, would it even have mattered whether it was Russia or someplace else that exposed these emails if they didn't have so much to hide? No, the distraction is that a foreign government is meddling in your elections. You should be outraged. Well, gee, how many elections have our CIA meddled in? It's not that I would want to see foreign powers meddling, but you can't tell me that the Chinese and the Saudi Arabians haven't indirectly meddled in our elections with donations to the Clinton Foundation. And they have a stake in media and other things. The Chinese are buying up Hollywood and putting in their notes on how they want productions to turn out. So all these other foreign governments, but it always comes back to Russia. I really want thinking minds to take a moment and look at all of this propaganda. We're coming up upon a new year. If there are any attacks and the blame goes to Russia, I want you to think long and hard about the possibility of a false flag. If for some reason you are cut off from the internet and all of a sudden the only information you are able to get a hold of is through the Ministry of Truth, otherwise known as the mainstream media, there is another calling card that it could be your government, or specifically the cabal in charge, trying to sabotage Trump doing something. But I wish all of you a very merry, safe, happy, productive New Year's. Like this video, share this video, comment on this video, whatever you like. Matthew Brenner, wishing you a belated Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and a wonderful 2017. Lots more real news coming at you upon the turn of the calendar.